Welcome back, everybody. I think enough time has passed that I can confidently make a tier list on this current meta. You know, not a whole lot has changed. We have the new Magnezone package. We're kind of discovering which of the new cards are sort of just fraudulent and don't really do much of anything. It's starting to get a little bit more settled in. And I need to explain these tiers because they are a bit unique. It's not how I usually do it, but with the way the meta is shaping up and how I'm predicting next week to go, this is going to be my classification for things. S tier, obviously, best deck. Don't worry about it. A tier, decks that I think are very strong, good plays for the week, but have, you know, like, they have some weakness. Maybe they take a bad matchup here or there, or just something wrong with them that prevents them from being S tier, but are still, nonetheless, great picks. A minus. This is a bit strange, but as I'm going through these decks and their matchups and how I feel about them, I don't really know how else to put them because these decks in A- tier are going to be like strong decks. They are good. They have the potential to win tournaments, but me personally, the way that I decide what deck I'm going to play in a tournament, these decks go against that strategy, and I personally would not recommend them. But again, I think they're strong enough with if they hit the right matchups, if just key games go in your favor, can still win a tournament. B tier are going to be decks that have some like very obvious strengths, but some real fundamental problems that keep them from being too powerful. C tier are going to be the sort of like, this deck on paper works. It has a strategy. It will execute that strategy in most games that they play. But I don't think that strategy is really strong enough to warrant considering playing the deck. And we'll start here with, I'm going to talk about both of the Altaria stuff in kind of one go. We have Altaria Greninja and Altaria Indeedee / Altaria Furfrou. They're kind of the same deck, but not really. And we'll get more into that. Altaria Greninja. We'll pull up a deck list for Altaria Greninja while we talk about it. This is a deck that, again, like on paper, very strong. You have Altaria. You have Greninja. You can hit 150 damage because of Greninja. You can Cyrus anything you want because of Greninja. But when you look at the matchup spread for this deck, and this is a deck that I played quite a bit in the last format, and was never really too in love with it because there are other Greninja decks that don't have to play a stage 1 line as well and just have more slots available to them. So this deck is pretty weak into other or other Chingling versions that have the space to play like Rocky Helmets in it, because your Chinglings are going to be doing 10 damage and taking 20, and their Chinglings are just going to be like blowing through yours, keeping you from getting into Greninja. Now, this deck list does have an answer to that. It has the Furfrou to knock out Chinglings early. It has the Frogadier, one Rare Candy to try to circumvent like Chingling being a problem. So that's pretty nice for you. But still, when you look at the matchup data for this deck list, or for this deck, it doesn't do too well into a whole lot of the meta. The matchup data is honestly like somewhat poor here. I can start reading some of them off to you. Magnezone Mega Absol, about a 55% win percentage. That's good. Hydreigon, 56% win percentage. That's the matchup data for like the two decks that really matter, and those are kind of where the positives end. After that, you get into Suicune Greninja, 46% win percentage, which is the best win percentage against Suicune for any Altaria. So like, if I had to recommend one Mega Altaria variant over the other, I would probably put this one above Altaria because the Suicune matchup is just better for this deck. Once we take another look against Greninja Mega Absol, not a good matchup. I played a lot of Greninja Mega Absol. Does not do good into that deck whatsoever. Doesn't do very good into Whimsicott, and doesn't do good into Magnezone or Oricorio. Those are kind of the big decks that I'm expecting for the next week. Really like the best of the best. Spoiler for the rest of the list, but we'll talk about, you know, where those placements need to be, whether or not I would recommend even playing them. And this deck doesn't have like overwhelmingly good matchups. I think the biggest draw for it is that it does decent into Suicune. It doesn't have a terribly, terribly negative matchup into Suicune. Where something like Altaria Furfrou, while being a bit better into some of the other decks, and again, we'll read off some matchups. Magnezone Mega Absol, 76% win percentage. Very, very good. Hydreigon, 62. Amazing. Magnezone Oricorio, Limitless does this a little bit weird. Not a great matchup, like 26% for that. Greninja Mega Absol, I don't know if I said it already. That's a good matchup. Greninja Mega Absol really struggles into Altaria stuff for the most part. That doesn't play a Greninja, like just has a Mega Altaria focused game plan. Doesn't do so good into it. But for the most part, like this deck list, you really don't want to see Magnezone or Suicune. And I don't think that's going to be a good thing for this upcoming week. Whereas the Greninja variant can deal with Suicune a bit better, and that's the most popular deck by far. Again, we'll get into all of it. Sorry, I'm doing so much foreshadowing, but it's kind of hard to talk about the meta in like a just one deck sort of thing. You know, you got to know the context of the whole meta to understand why decks are ranked the way they are. So, honestly, with what I'm seeing, I think I can say that Altaria Greninja, I like maybe bottom of A tier. Its Suicune matchup really makes me like this a bit more than this variant right here. Like this variant takes like a 30% win percentage to Suicune, man. It's abysmal. And I don't think you can afford to do that in this next upcoming week. But at least this deck gives you a fighting chance with the extra damage buff and being able to access something else on the bench. I don't think the Chingling really doesn't do like a whole lot against Suicune. It doesn't slow them down for very long. You kind of got to go like Chingling plus Mars on the same turn in order for the Chingling to have done anything. If you don't get that Mars, then nothing's really going to happen because they've just built up a giant hand. And then you got to deal with, like, here comes the Greninja, and here comes the Suicune doing massive damage, and Altaria also, like, 2 shots Suicune, and Suicune 2 shots Mega Altaria. So it's a tough matchup for sure. It's really hard to navigate that as an Altaria player. But this one does, again, give you, like, a slight edge into it. So I'd say this guy is, like, I can sort of recommend it for next week, but this one, I would probably stay away from as a meta pick. It is still, again, a very strong deck. I would not be surprised if a Furfrou variant could win a tournament, but me personally, I would not pick it going into the next week. Now, I do just want to talk about Suicune because I think that this is what is going to... Like, Suicune is the deck. It's S tier. If you look at the Pocket Mage tournament, this deck was played... It was the #1 played deck. And it was played twice as much as the second most played deck. Then, when you go into day 2, so Suicune Greninja had an 18% meta share. Pretty big. In day 2, it had a 37.6% meta share. So, it literally doubled going from day 1 to day 2, you know, as far as, like, percentages go. That is insane. Suicune is still the top dog. It is just the deck. It takes great matchups. The variant that we're on right now is the Greninja, double baby Greninja, because there's now like more Oricorio. There's more lightning stuff in the format because it just got the massive buff of the new Magnezone deck being so good at setting itself up. So I think that the double baby Greninja line is the way to go for this next week. Just gives you a much more consistent way to deal with the Oricorio rather than having to find your one of baby Greninja. This is the variant that I would be playing. I wouldn't be playing Suicune because I've played enough Suicune. But if you wanted to, you know, if you wanted to set out and win a tournament, like this is probably the way to do it. You will have to play a lot of Suicune mirrors, which again can be... I think that the Suicune mirror used to be like pretty skill intensive. Well, sorry, the Suicune mirror was more skill intensive, I think, when we had cards, when this list was playing cards like Repel and just some more like disruption, some more disruption cards. This one feels a little bit more like, well, if I can just draw better than my opponent, or maybe if I get the first energy attachment down, I might just win the game in the mirror match. Obviously, there are going to be intricacies that pop up, but you have less of the Well, my list is playing Leaf. So your Repel doesn't matter. My list is playing double red card, or sorry, a Mars and a red card. So I can set you back more than you can. This is pretty much like what Suicune looks like now. So you know what exactly you're getting into when you're playing the mirror match. And there's not a whole lot of setback that you can do to the other Suicune if you, like, go first starting Froakie. If you go first starting Froakie, you're kind of cooked a little bit if you don't have an immediate, like, rare candy into Greninja EX. So it is a lot more draw dependent, I feel, than it used to be. That aside, best deck in the format, most consistent, takes just great matchups across the board. Really only has, does struggle a little bit more against the lightning stuff than it ever has previously because of the new consistency buffs. But it can still do it. It's not even like abysmal matchup for the deck. If you look at the data here, when I can find it and give you an exact win percentage, it's really, like, it's not the worst thing in the world. Yeah, if you look at Suicune Greninja, the Magnezones took a 52% win percentage against it. So you're, like, slightly unfavored. I'd say it's somewhere between 42 and a 48 win percentage for Suicune against that deck, depending on what cards are actually in their list. And that's not the worst thing in the world when the Magnezone Oricorio deck, you would wish on paper, would just outright beat Suicune. But, you know, it's Suicune, man. So good luck with that. I don't know if we'll ever get a true counter. Might just have to power creep it. Maybe like Mega... What's a Mega Lightning Pokemon that they would actually make good? Mega Zeraora, they might make juiced and insane. So maybe when Mega Zeraora comes around, we'll have a way to consistently deal with Suicune. But until then, Suicune's going to be S tier. It's going to be what this entire list is revolving around for the most part. Now let's go to Magnezone Absol. This is going to be another A- tier deck. On paper, bro, you get to play Magnezone Absol, Darkrai, Chingling. Maybe, like, the strongest cast of Pokemon in any deck. But when they're all put together, you end up with something that into the current meta does not have the best time. Again, this is a very, very strong deck. It does have the ability to do well in a tournament. But if I was to consider this deck, I would stay away from it. It's really like, it's one great matchup into the meta is Hydreigon. Comes in at like a 63% win percentage. 60 to 63 depending on like the tournament, whatever. Other like big decks, Suicune Greninja, 40%. Mega Altaria Greninja, 44%. What else is important here? Mega Altaria Furfrou, 23% win percentage. And then I'm curious about the Magnezone Oricorio. Magnezone Oricorio, about a 50% win percentage. That makes sense to me. The Chinglings plus the Darkrai's it puts a lot of pressure onto the Oricorios, plus just the Magnezone itself, knocking out their Oricorios and then turning it into a Magnezone v Magnezone battle. But given those matchups that I just explained to you, it's not taking a good Suicune matchup. It's not taking a necessarily great Mega Altaria matchup, depending on the variant. And its really only positive matchup is Hydreigon. So I would weigh this just in the A- tier. Because of that, like, I really don't love entering a tournament with something where my win percentage against the best deck is 40%. That's just it's just a bit too low for me to really consider it. 45 like Absol Greninja, that is something that we can get done. That is not a death sentence, but to just be behind against the deck that I'm probably going to see the most and not really even get a good trade-off for it, like Hydreigon, cool. That's nice to have a good matchup into it, but to then take bad matchups to the Altaria stuff as well, you know, it's not really doing anything that's amazing me. So I'm going to leave it an A-. Just, it's strong, but I don't think it's the weak for it. Now, I want to talk about one of my favorite decks. It was my favorite deck of last format, and that's going to be the Darkrai Absol Greninja variant. I think I would recommend this more than either of these two decks. I think I can put it in A tier. We'll come over, we'll take a look at the list. This is the way it's being played now. I like the Mars in here over the red card. So, some things to note with this deck is it had a pretty good time at a Suicune last format because not a lot of Suicunes were playing the Frogadier. It seems now more of them are on the Frogadier, which definitely hurts because your game plan with this deck is really to go like Chingling, lock them, wait till you get your Greninjas and your guys set up with energy on them. And then, like, once you're ready to go, you hit them with a Mars or a red card, and then just start attacking into the Suicune, or maybe go, like, Cyrus on the Greninja, or sorry, the Froakie, knock that out, and then just look to get an easy point through either their benched Indeedee, or just by brute forcing your way through the Suicune in the active spot. That was really the play you tried to go for. And if they're playing Frogadier, that all goes out the window. Like, the Chingling becomes completely useless if they're able to find that Frogadier early. You're now item locking them for nothing. So if that happens, then it gets really, really tough. You got to switch to aggressive mode pretty quickly, and this deck doesn't do great going super aggressive into Suicune for the most part. But its matchups in general, right? Like, it has a 43% win percentage against Suicune. That's not so bad. You can still get around and be successful against that deck if they don't find the Frogadier, if they're not playing the Frogadier, if you can just, like, reset their hand down, keep them from getting into the Frogadier. Does fine against the Mega Altaria Furfrou, about a 45% win percentage. From experience, I can tell you I don't even need to look at the matchup data. Great into Mega Altaria Greninja, because you are able to item lock them out of Greninja. And again, that's going to depend on if they're playing the Frogadier or not. If they are playing the Frogadier, things get a lot scarier for you, without a doubt. Especially if you can't find, like, Darkrai or the Rocky Helmet to, you know, deal with their Chinglings more quickly. But honestly, this deck is probably just less well-positioned than the Altaria Greninja. I think that this is likely the better Mega variant to pair with Greninja, but I still think the deck is pretty good. Magnezone Oricorio, because I think that's another big matchup for this week, is not great. I mean, obviously, like, you don't really have a great way to deal with the Oricorio. If you can set up, it's sort of fine. Again, the Chingling's not going to do a whole lot, but if you can find your way into your Greninjas, then you will be okay. But you got to find them. You got to get the Greninjas out pretty quickly so you can start damaging the Magnezones. Really, the big problem is that they now have the Clement and the Licia to set up the Magnezones, like, super, super early. And the Magnemites can just blast through the Chinglings. Like, if they go second starting Magnemite and they knock out your Chingling, you're in a really bad spot immediately, to be honest. So that's not great. The matchup definitely got way harder because it's more consistent. Prior to that, you could usually count on your opponent not setting up a double Magnezone too quickly because you're shutting off items with Chingling for just a little bit. Give you that time to set up for the Greninja Cyrus play on their Magneton or Magnemite. And then you just got to deal with the Oricorios, which the Oricorios can be dealt with just by retreating all of your Pokemon all the time while doing passive damage with Darkrai and Rocky Helmet. But now that they can set up those Magnezones so quickly, it's a lot harder for it. So this is probably the true bottom of A tier deck for me, and I think it's also just biased because I love the variant so much. But a lot of its good matchups became a lot harder, and again, that's just meta dependent. If this deck is opting to play Frogadier, matchup gets a lot harder. The Magnezone Oricorio, which I think we're going to see a bit more of this week, it's not a great matchup for it. So, like, bottom of A tier for the Darkrai Absol Greninja variant. Still a very, very fun deck. One of the most fun decks I have playing in the meta. But it looks like for the next week, it's going to be a little bit trickier to do too well with it. Now let's move on to Magnezone Oricorio. And I think that there's only one spot for the best deck, but this deck is probably the second strongest. This had the highest win percentage of any deck in the Pocket Match tournament, and it just makes sense looking at the metagame. So, metagame started. Magnezone Oricorio, very clearly a strong deck. A lot of Mega Lopunny to deal with the Magnezone stuff. Now, not a lot of Lopunny. Everything else in the meta is kind of free for this deck. About, just slightly positive matchup into Suicune, but all this other stuff, man, it does pretty fantastic. It does great into the Altaria stuff. It does great into the Darkrai Absol Greninja deck. This new Magnezone is just scary. And this is the incorrect photo of Magnezone. We are, like, just playing the new Magnezone in this deck. That's the better one, without a doubt. The 90 damage is sadly just too much to deal with. Taking a look at the deck list, like, dude, like, almost nothing has changed with it. The only difference I see here from what was played last format is now, instead of playing double Copycat, we play one Clement. And then, obviously, the new Magnemites and the new Magnezones, because doing 30 is so strong for one energy. The 50 damage, the 50 HP on the Magnemite doesn't really matter all that much. This deck, to me, is probably my #1 pick going into the meta. And so if you want a big brain, you know, you got to think of that. I guess, like, the best deck to play for the next week would be something that could beat Magnezone and could beat Suicune. I don't know that that deck exists, but, like, that would be the way. So if you're gonna spend your time labbing something, if you play a deck that could beat both of those at the same time, you're probably just super chilling. It would dominate a tournament. But yeah, again, Magnezone is going to take good matchups against all these other decks and have a slightly positive matchup against Suicune Greninja. So, like, besides it just being less consistent than Suicune Greninja, it is kind of the guy right now. And I think we're going to see a lot more of it next week. And maybe decks will adapt. Suicune Greninja, I'm sure there are things it can do to better deal with Magnezone or Oricorio. When we look at the list, you know, they don't always include the best versions of Suicune. And as far as the matchup data goes, they might not include that you're playing double baby Greninja or something like that. So, but just taking an even matchup to it is pretty good. And, you know, there's also, like, how much of that matchup depends on you flipping or your opponent flipping a tails at some point with the Magnezone. Because it can just, like, score a free knockout on the Magnezone. Magnezone can just score a free knockout on a Suicune if they flip tails, right? They end up doing net 0 damage to you, and that's broken. Like, I don't know why we printed this card, bro. I don't know. Man, I think the Clement would have been enough for this to just be a fantastic deck. I don't know that we needed the Mirror Shot Magnezone alongside it, but we got it. Yeah, this deck looks very scary for the next week. We won't spend too long on this deck, but we'll just throw both of these in here, I guess. I mean, this is probably more like C tier or B tier. It's just the Mega Lopunny variant. These decks do fantastic against Magnezone and basically nothing else. Mega Lopunny Lucario is really the big variant, and why we saw Mega Lopunny have so much success at the start of the meta is because everyone was trying out new Magnezone variants. Not a lot of people are playing Suicune. Its Suicune matchup is absolutely abysmal. We'll take a look at the deck list here, in case you're curious. I would not recommend this deck much at all, to be honest. But it's very strong in a Magnezone because we are playing a fighting deck. We can deal with the Oricorio so easily. And then the Magnezones, you know, we can also do pretty well against. So that's going to be a super free matchup, but everything else, I mean, it's Suicune Greninja, you're taking like a sub 30% matchup too. And that is really bad. I don't know how much of the Magnezone alleviates that, because even just looking at, like, what is it? Like Magnezone Mega Absol, like, that deck doesn't even have a positive matchup against Suicune. So this one might do slightly better because Mega Lopunny can, like, one-shot a Suicune if you're lucky. If you hit that 25% chance. So I might be not putting enough respect on the Magnezone Lopunny variant, but I have not seen it do much of anything into the metagame. And honestly, I don't love the Mega Lopunny as a card. You know, as easily as you can one-shot a Suicune, you can do 0 damage. And that is really to play any deck like that. So, like, I would never recommend playing a Mega Lopunny deck just because the card can just do nothing, man. The card can do nothing. And if coin flips are not going your way, it's going to feel so bad and maybe be the worst day of your life playing a deck like this. So that's where I'm going to leave Mega Lopunny. Again, great into Magnezone. Everything else is pretty bad. The fun guy, Mega Venusaur. And I am very torn on where to put this deck. Mega Venusaur has a very good matchup into Suicune. It reminds me a lot of Decidueye. Big grass Pokemon that is not going to take a whole lot of damage against Suicune because you limit your bench and can dish out a good amount of damage, put him to sleep, like do a lot of annoying stuff against Suicune. Has some problems. Altaria Furfrou, not a good matchup. Altaria Greninja seems to be much better for you because they don't have anything really like for early aggression. It's just the Altaria, so they need to get that set up really quickly before your Ivysaur hits the bench. Good matchup into Absol stuff because the Absol just can't do anything against Mega Venusaur. Like, they're three-shotting your Mega Venusaur. And I'm actually curious, like the only real thing that could help it out is if you're playing an Absol variant as well. But yeah, even that doesn't do it for it. It's just tough, man. You're not doing a whole lot of damage to the Mega Venusaur. This next problem was, and when you play it on ladder, like, you'll play this deck on ladder, and you'll encounter so many fire decks. Everyone is still playing fire decks. In tournament, no one's really playing fire decks. So, this deck actually has, like, pretty good matchup spread right now. I think, like, oh my gosh, man. I think it's bottom of A-. I think it's bottom of A- because you have to get the Ivysaur online instantly or else the game's over. And if your opponent has a way to deal with that, you know, let's take a look because I know you're all itching for it. What is the best performing Mega Venusaur variant? And it's this. This guy, what was his... I gotta find his name. I gotta give him his dues because he's been... Jay Krangle. I believe Jay Krangle has just been playing this deck for like the last week and doing very well with it. Making small adjustments as time goes on to the meta to better suit the meta. And this deck had a literally 0% win percentage against Magnezone, which is probably like the biggest, oh no, like, oh, I'm scared. But I feel like, but with Jay Krangle incorporating the double Rocky Helmet, it should be a bit better. There is still the issue of you're only playing 2 heals. Like, my Mega Venusaur list felt pretty good against Magnezone Oricorio because I was playing 4 heals and double Rocky Helmet. So it's like, yo, your Oricorios are not doing a thing to me. I'm putting them to sleep. They're taking poison damage, Rocky Helmet damage, everything in the world. So I felt pretty good into Magnezone Oricorio. But with only 2 heals, it does get a bit scarier, right? Oricorio can wall you, just keep doing 50. You're trying to heal the damage off with the lilies, but you only play 2 of them. And then once the Magnezone comes active, it's a little bit tricky to deal with. I mean, that matchup is probably so terrible because it's going to be a long game. There's going to be a lot of coin flips involved for sleep and for Magnezone's effect. And this variant right here. So, I have played it and I've tried it. And again, it's hard to get some good testing in because there's so much just like people still playing Charizard even though the deck is buns. I still might just like the one Bulbasaur line instead. Obviously, I haven't taken it to a tournament, so I can't even really speak on it. But, like, I mean, dude, if your opponent, it's really tough, right? Because the idea here is if you're playing 2 Bulbasaur and this first one is, like, doomed to get knocked out, well, what's going to happen to the second one, right? Like, how am I ever going to synthesis? If I don't get the synthesis on my second turn, how is me using synthesis on, like, my 3rd turn any better if the first one got knocked out? I don't really know, man. I feel like if the one Bulbasaur is getting knocked out, the second Ivysaur is probably getting knocked out as well. I guess it does give you a bit more time. That's probably the only thing, is it would give you a bit more time to actually find the guy, which can be very important. When you're playing the one Bulbasaur line, sometimes you just don't get the quick grow. You know, sometimes you don't get the quick grow, sometimes you don't get the Ivysaur. And then that's it, because that's your only game plan. The one Chingling, The item block, I'm sure, is helpful. Starting it would suck because you're only playing 2 Pokeball and 2 basics. It's not like the easiest thing in the world to find. I've watched a lot of Decidueyes lose games like that. You know, starting Chingling and then just conceding because that's all they have in play is the one Chingling, and they can't ever find the Pokeball or the Bulbasaur. Like, starting Chingling would probably... I mean, there's so much other Chinglings in the format that I can't imagine that feels the best. But this is the best performing list. I would be curious to see how a solo Mega Venusaur would do. It does feel like matchup roulette a little bit, which is why I have it in A-. Like, gonna do good against Suicune, but then some of these other decks, depending on how you hit it, and just how you draw, man. You have one game plan. Set up Mega Venusaur. If Mega Venusaur does not get set up fast enough, you lose. That's just it. Very linear deck. But when the Mega Venusaur is online, that can just be strong enough to win you the game. Not when your opponent's doing like 130 damage to you, though, with a Mega Altaria. That becomes a little bit too much to deal with sometimes. Mega Altaria can also just knock out your Ivysaurs like instantly. Hydreigons can also just knock you out instantly, but with this Chingling variant, that can also kind of help you there. You might be able to Chingling lock long enough to set up for... oh, there's no hand disruption in this deck, so never mind. You can't even go Chingling lock, red card, plus Ivysaur synthesis to try to not get knocked out by a Hydreigon. Yeah, man, it's Venusaur. I don't have much faith in the guy, but it's kind of just like Decidueye. I wouldn't really ever recommend Decidueye because it has like the one game plan of get Decidueye set up faster, I lose. But its matchups on paper are very, very good. Let's just bang these decks out. I'm not going to bother with deck list or really much of anything for them. We're going to just throw all of the Jolteon variants here in B tier. Not a lot of matchup data on them, so it's kind of hard to talk on them, but again, I think that just the overall power of Jolteon is lower than these other decks. It just doesn't have the strength of these other decks, like have a really good win on that isn't just like hope Jolteon scams my opponent early and I get to like Cyrus around things and knock out their threats as they're trying to attach to them. A good play can get around that. If the opponent's playing Sabrina, they can just Sabrina around the Jolteon, then attach to whatever needs the energy, and then bring that up next turn, start swinging to the Jolteon, like whatever. I don't think the decks are too strong. They can do it. They can do it. You can take a Jolteon far. Out of all the variants, I almost prefer the Magnezone one because at least you have some sort of backup plan that isn't just Jolteons or Oricorios. Oricorio with a 2-prizer is pretty weak right now, I think, because a lot of decks have a way to deal with the Oricorio, and then they just get to win the game by knocking out the Jolteon as well. So I think the Magnezone variant is probably the best out of all of them, but I'm not really too big on the deck. I think that Magnezone Oricorio is just the much better Lightning variant. So, like, I wouldn't even consider these decks for tournament play. I think this is the way to go. Magnezone has way more strengths than trying to pair Magnezone Oricorio as a package has just much better strengths than Jolteon Magnezone does, or even Magnezone Absol. So yeah, I can't really rate them much higher than B tier. Okay, since I'm staring at them, I do just want to start throwing these down. C tier for any Mega Venusaur variant that isn't just solo Mega Venusaur. My boy Sekirao has finally gotten off of this variant. Thank God. It's so useless. Just a terrible deck. Steelix. This deck, to me, from the moment I played it, it felt like an Oricorio deck with a Steelix as a win con, and that's not great when you're playing a Mega Pokemon. I think this deck only did good at the start of the format because it was Oricorio, and Oricorio's usually pretty good at the start of the format. Mega Absol Oricorio, I don't even know what we're talking about with this, so I'll just throw it C tier. I don't know. Darkrai Giratina, I can't believe you put that on here. Also a C tier deck. Yeah, let's just start trying to blast through some of these ones that I do not take seriously. Crobat Mega Absol, also a C tier deck. Not really a thing at all. I hate to do this with this next one. I will put Whimsicott in B tier as well. And not one Whimsicott had more than 5 wins in this entire tournament. That is really bad. And I don't think anything's going to change for the next week. I'll throw the deck list up for you. I don't think anything's going to change matchup-wise. It takes an abysmal Suicune matchup. It does do good into Altaria stuff from what I'm seeing. Not a whole lot of matches were played against Altaria decks, but, you know, there's something to say for that at least the matchups that were played, it could do well enough. I think that just the matchups don't look good for the deck, man. They don't look good. They haven't looked good for a bit of time, and I really don't think that anything is changing in favor of this deck doing all that much better. Like, we're expecting Magnezone Oricorio to go on the rise. If this is the variant you're playing, Magnezone Oricorio is still pretty difficult for you. It's not the best matchup by any means, and it takes like a 25% win percentage to swing. And that's the killer for it, man. If you're taking that bad of a matchup to Suicune, you are in danger for sure. And I don't really know how you alleviate that with this deck at all. I mean, you gotta have a big bench. You gotta have the double Ariados down so you can knock out the Suicunes. And you gotta hope that they don't get Greninja EX out. Greninja EX will have a pretty delicious feast on your Whimsicott. They can Cyrus up the Ariados, and if one Ariados goes down or a Spinnerack goes down, then you can now no longer... You kind of just lose the game if that happens. Because now Whimsicott is never one-shotting a Suicune, and they're two-shotting you, and they just have an easier time setting that up and taking their prizes, right? If they knock out the Spinnerack, they just got to get through one Whimsicott, and they win. So it's not a good time for the deck at all. Unfortunately, because I do really like the deck. I think it's very, very fun to play. But I cannot recommend to you that this is the deck that you play to a tournament this weekend. Next up, we're going to talk about Absol Hydreigon. Take a look at the list. Not much has changed. This format didn't really get any new toys to play with. And really, the biggest weakness of the deck, or sorry, the biggest detriment to it, and why it's like not quite as good, is the Magnezone matchup just got a bit harder. Magnezone now went from being, hey, we're both trying to two-shot each other. Hydreigon can just do a bit more damage, can get through the Oricorios, to now Hydreigon has to deal with the stupid coin flips. So, the Hydreigon might just lose that two-shot match to the Magnezone because of it. And same with the Mega Absol, right? The Mega Absol might just not get to finish off the knockout on the Magnezone because it has to flip through the dumb effect that they printed on that card. So, other than that, it's kind of the same where its Suicune matchup isn't, amazing. It's like 40%, 41%, something like that. But if you just go Rare Candy Hydreigon at the start of the game, you kind of just beat everything in the world. So, it's the premier high roll deck. This is the one to play if you're feeling lucky. Chingling seems to be the guy that people are including. Not seeing a whole lot of, or at least this top deck list didn't play the Absol. It seems like most of the top deck lists are actually off of the Absol. At least the best performing ones did not play the baby Absol, sorry, that does 30 to the bench. They're avoiding that and just going for a little bit of item lock, plus hoping they high roll with Hydreigon, which is, I mean, it's fine, man. It's what the deck tries to do. If you high roll with it, GG's. So let's talk about Mega Charizard. Until I see someone make a list that convinces me this deck is anything, it is another deck that I just simply cannot recommend. It has one game plan of set up your Charizard and hope that that's enough. The problem with it, this is the same problem that I think that Blaziken had when we were playing the Entei variant, but this deck kind of requires you to play Entei because you need so much more to get the Mega Charizard while attacking. And that is, you could just lose the game by a couple things, right? So let's say you have Entei as your active Pokemon and a Charmander on the bench. You might lose the game to an early Cyrus Greninja play on the Charmeleon. You might lose to a Sabrina on the Charmeleon. So what you now have to do is you have to have Entei double Charmander on the bench, which gives your opponent the win condition of knockout Entei, Cyrus/Sabrina on the other baby on the bench, completely avoiding the Mega Charizard Y. And by the time you have the Mega Charizard Y set up, your opponent probably has the capability to do that. So it has no good matchups. It's so difficult to make this deck be super great. You just have to high roll in an unprecedented way in order for this deck to come together. And your opponent has to miss things too. If there was a Charizard variant that could just go Mega Charizard and somehow clean up the bench so that wasn't a problem, it'd be fine, but there's not a way to do it. So it also does 50 damage to itself. It goes down to 170, man. You can deal with the Mega Charizard. It's not like the easiest thing in the world to do, but yeah, more often than not, you're going to lose the game because your opponent goes through Entei, and then they go through another Charmander on the bench. But if you get Exodia, where you get to just go Entei in the active spot, one Charizard Y, Entei gets knocked out, Charizard Y comes up and attacks twice, GG's, then it's really difficult. It's really difficult for your opponent to win the game. But because you're often going to lose the game, not because your Mega Charizard Y got knocked out, but because all of your supporting dudes did. I just haven't seen a list that really convinces me, man. Again, it feels a lot like Mega Blaziken Entei did in that format. So, like, B tier, I can't recommend the deck. Oh, I forgot this one just real quick. Magnezone Heliolisk. Again, it's going to be a C tier deck. It's not real. Don't worry about it. Don't even think about it. Mega Blaziken Heatmore for the exact same reasons as Mega Charizard, I'm putting in B tier. Well, not the exact same reasons, but it's a stage 2 Mega. It's hard to set up. It's not taking any, like, considerably great matchups at the moment. Still loses to Suicune. Doesn't have the best time into the new Magnezone. Overall, just, like, not a great play at the moment. Let me talk about Decidueye as well. I think it's also just, like, a B tier deck. I think Mega Venusaur does what Decidueye is aiming to do just a bit better. And I'll show you the list here that did the best, because it is kind of interesting that the Decidueye list did not opt to play any of the new Quick Grow extracts. No Quick Grow extracts in the list, which again is pretty interesting to me. Like, maybe I'm wrong and it's better suited because with Magnezone Oricorio being a thing, like Decidueye has the baby Decidueye, which can deal with the Oricorios a lot better. But this deck does have the problem of, like, all Altaria variants are pretty bad for it. It can struggle against early red card plus Chingling Lock on it, not being able to rare candy into the Decidueye. It can just get stuck, man. The deck can just get stuck, and that's not fantastic. And its Suicune matchup is, like, it's good, but I don't think it's anything amazing. Like, it's not as good as it used to be, for sure. This Decidueye deck, it does not have as good of a Suicune matchup as it once did. I just want to see the actual data on it. Actually came in at a 63% win percentage. Probably because not a lot of them are playing the double Greninja EX at the moment. So it's still good. And then from there, Magnezone Oricorio, they actually went 0-2 against Magnezone Oricorio. Very, very interesting. But it's like, it's just... Dude, it's just like Venusaur, but I think Venusaur is just a bit better at the moment compared to Decidueye. I know Decidueye was cool for like a time, but I don't think he's too great at the moment. It really just loses hard to aggressive decks, even worse than Ivysaur does, because against Decidueye, you only have to do 80 damage on like the second turn to knock out their Dartrix. Against Venusaur, you have to do 100 damage to their Ivysaur. 80 and 100 is a big difference. That means that this Dartrix can get knocked out by Mega Absols on the second turn. It's a lot easier for an Altaria to pull off a knockout against it. And you could just lose the game on the spot because of that. Just not setting up into the Decidueye fast enough. And even if you go Rare Candy Decidueye and only have one energy on it, like, that's still a problem. Because an Altaria can very easily two-shot this. Suicune, if they get the Greninja EX set up, it becomes super difficult. Like, Suicune probably just looks to go one Suicune, one Froakie, try to turn it into a Greninja EX. And if they get the Greninja EX online, then that's where the problem comes in. Or, again, just you not setting up Decidueye fast enough. You're kind of... You need to get it, like, very, very quickly, or else the Suicune can run through the Rowlets and the Dartrixes fast. So... Decidueye, yeah, again, like B tier, again, the deck can do fine. Like B tier is, these are decks that fundamentally work. They do work, but I think that they have flaws in them that make them not something I would consider to play to a tournament, but still can, because again, they are decks that fundamentally work. They have a game plan, they have a strategy, they have some good matchups, and if they hit those good matchups, they can go far in a tournament run. I'm not saying they're unplayable. I'm just saying I wouldn't play them. This is the last deck I want to talk about, and man, I don't know what to do with it. Greninja Oricorio. Jimbo swears by this deck, and I just don't get it. Again, fundamentally, it works. It's a thing. I'm looking at a list that is 7-0 right now in a tournament. I don't get it, bro. I have played the deck in ranked, and I don't understand it. So, like, it's a very simple deck. You're Greninja, you have Oricorio and Zeraora, you look to go Greninja, Cyrus, knock out the things that can deal with the Oricorio, win the game that way. That's what this deck decides to do. Your damage is capped out at 50, bro. You're doing 50 a turn. 70 if you have a Greninja in play, but like 70 a turn, that's it. That's all you're doing. And if your opponent has a way to deal with an Oricorio quickly, you kind of just lose. Also, if you don't start with like Zeraoras on the bench, you get really far behind on energy attachments because like not every, like if your opponent's Suicune and they go double Froakie on the bench, oh my gosh, it gets so difficult. It is a tough deck. It's going to do well into some things, right? Like a Charizard deck probably can't deal with this, which that's not even one to really consider all that much. Mega Absol variants are going to struggle against it because you have double Cyrus and the Oricorio is just going to lock everything up. It's not going to be the best for them. Suicune, I don't see, like, dude, even Magnezone Oricorio struggles against it. Like, the only plus is that, but you kind of need Exodia, bro. Like, so this is my problem with the deck. What you are asking for from this deck is to set up a Greninja Cyrus play before your opponent gets to go rare candy into their own Greninja. Once they rare candy into their own Greninja, and they are able to bring that thing into the active spot, knock out an Oricorio, do damage to a Zeraora the next turn, or whatever they're going to do, like, it gets really hard for you, and you're trying to do that as a deck that doesn't get to start Suicune and draw the additional cards. So you're racing with them to get into that Greninja before they do without having the additional draw. That, to me, is like why I look at the deck and go, how does this ever work? The double copycat, I guess, makes sense because, like, your opponent can pass this Suicune, and now they have a 5-card hand, and you get to go copycat, and then there's your Greninja. But that still doesn't allow you to go Cyrus the next turn. Dude, I don't know, man. I don't know. But Jimbo swears by it, bro. He thinks that this deck is like it's the truth. It's all he plays, man. He loves this deck. But for me, every time I've played it, I don't get it. I've won games with it, right? Like, it's not a total brick. But overall in the meta, man, I don't understand. I don't know how this thing ever beats Hydreigon. Again, you're asking to get rare candy, Greninja, Cyrus onto their Dino before they get rare candy Hydreigon, and you don't necessarily, like, you're drawing the same amount of cards that they are for the most part. I just don't get it, man. I don't get the deck, but there are people that I'm looking at a 7-0 deck list with this thing right now, man. So, like, it can do it, but me personally, I don't get it. So I'm sticking it in B tier. That's pretty much it, man. I think that's every deck I want to talk about. The only one not on here is I just did a deck profile on Arceus Carnivine. I think, honestly, the deck is like B tier. It doesn't have a great time against Suicune. Go figure. But that deck is a lot of fun. That's why it's my current favorite deck to play, because I really do enjoy it. But that is it, man. Let me know what you guys think. Hopefully all of this makes sense to you, and the difference between A tier and A- is heard clear. I think the meta is getting real polarized right now. It's getting real polarized, just like it did last format towards the end, where we all found out that, hey, Suicune and Hydreigon, those are kind of the two that are running the show. But now we just have the Magnezone in here, which adding a third deck to the blend of, like, these are the best decks does help a bit, because now you can play counter decks to, like, certain decks and blah, 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 blah. Suicune is still the king. You play something that has a decent matchup to Suicune this next weekend. That is the takeaway. Thank you guys so much for watching. Subscribe if you haven't already. If you watched all the video and you're here and you still haven't subscribed, do it, bro. Like, you know you're interested, bro. You like me, I think. We're best friends. We can be. All right, dude. I'll see you on the next one.